What's up guys, welcome back to another video where today I wanted to talk about Resident Evil and the possibility of it having another remake. Now I know this is probably a controversial opinion as yeah, the original was great enough, and I'm talking about not only the original, but I'm talking about the remake. Personally, in my opinion, the Resident Evil remake is by far one of my favorite Resident Evil games of all time. In fact, it is one of my favorite video games of all time. So I don't want to be titled as someone who didn't play the remake or I didn't like the remake. No, I love the remake. In fact, it is my favorite remake out of all the Resident Evil games. But I made this video to make my point clear. There's a bunch of reasons as to why I want them to remake it again. Now, I just want to get this out of the way real quick. Resident Evil 4 came out in 2005. Sure, it's a beloved title and people wanted to see a remake of it. Okay. They kind of skipped Code Veronica, which I still consider a mainline game, yes. And I think it's a very important part of the story that people who didn't experience it, I think, should. Now, the reason I bring this up is that since it came out in 2005, let's look back at the remake of the first game. That game came out 3 years before Resident Evil 4, and now we have a remake of Resident Evil 4. Now, I didn't believe that Resident Evil 4 necessarily needed a remake, and I still think this to this day. I don't think it really needed one. I think the game's fine as it is, although I did like the remake that just came out a month ago of it. Either way, my point stands, it is older than a game they just remade recently, and sure, it's the most popular title. A lot of people love Resident Evil 4, and they've been waiting for them to remake it. But considering we're skipping the mainline titles being Resident Evil 1 Remake, Resident Evil 0, and Resident Evil Code Veronica, we already remade 2, 3, 4, yeah, and sure, we remade the first game. But here's my main point. Okay, so let's look back at Resident Evil Remake, okay? That was a game that basically took the original game, improved it by a lot, changed the graphics, obviously made better graphics, added a lot of rooms. Yeah, there was some tiny bits of cut content, but there really wasn't that much. Compared to the new games, there wasn't really much at all to be cut. But we look back, and it has fixed camera angles, okay? I love fixed camera angles. I think they're very underrated by today's standards. I think we should go back to that aspect in some ways, but as of right now, I know they're switching all this stuff to third person. But the thing is, I want to talk about the modern audience of Resident Evil today. You see, obviously we have the modern audiences for gaming today, but we also have the older audience of gaming today, or people that played games years ago, or a decade or two ago, just like Resident Evil. So people who have already played the original Resident Evil games, or, you know, the older games from, you know, maybe 1998 to, let's say, even 2012, those people are used to that type of Resident Evil. They love that stuff, and a lot of people are going back to these games. So what I really wanted to talk about is modern gaming, okay? Obviously, we're at that point where we're going to be in all these high 4K, 8K type graphics and stuff, usually in third person or first person or something with that debacle, because we don't go by fixed camera angles anymore. And the thing is, there's a lot of players now, and I know most of them, okay? Most of them that I've seen, well, I shouldn't say most of them, but there is a large majority out there who don't know anything about the other Resident Evil games, because they don't want to. They were only introduced to these by the newer games, and some people don't really want to go back to that. Some people has only played 7, 8, 2 Remake, 3 Remake, 4 Remake. They're only used to those 5 games. They're not used to the other ones. And so my point stands is that, well, spoiler alert for Resident Evil 4 Remake, near the end of the game, if you haven't seen the post-credit scenes already, it shows Albert Wesker, okay? And I'm guessing, and I'm just guessing this, and I'm pretty sure it's not really a bad guess, that they are planning a Resident Evil 5 remake, okay? So they are gonna remake Resident Evil 5. But the thing about Resident Evil 5 is that we don't really know Chris or Albert Wesker in the new remakes. And I want to make this point clear. Jill in Resident Evil 3 Remake, I feel like was a mistake. Okay, and I don't want to talk about the character or anything like that and how they changed the character, even just by a little bit. I don't want to argue about that at all. My point is, Resident Evil 1 Remake, okay, let's say that's the canon right here. You put Resident Evil 1 Remake and Resident Evil 3 Remake side by side. Let's say you're going to play it in that order. It takes place the exact same year. Resident Evil 3 only takes place a couple to few months after the first game happens. And sure, Resident Evil 1 Remake came out a long time ago. The graphics are going to be different, but my point is, this is a different Jill. And I don't want to put this as necessarily character development. Okay, let's compare 3 Remakes Jill to the original 3 Jill. They are very off. Like, this is not the Jill that you knew in the original 1999 game. And again, I don't want to argue about, I don't like this Jill or she's different. My point is, if you play Resident Evil 1 Remake, or even just the original, it doesn't matter, just Resident Evil 1 Remake with the original Resident Evil 3, it fits better in the timeline, okay? We have a different Jill now. This is very different from the Jill we used to know. And if we had a remake of 1, which is at least a little similar to that, it would make a lot more sense to newer players. And other than that, sure, we're gonna have, obviously, a third-person mode and all that stuff, but a lot of people today don't like playing fixed camera angles. Sure, I love it. There's a lot of people out there who are old fans, or some new fans as well, who also enjoy fixed camera angles. But the problem is that there's still a large majority out there, and I feel like I see this all the time. People don't want to play the older games because they don't like the fixed camera angles. People always ask all the time anyway, where's the remake of 1? Because they don't know, they're not aware of it, and I feel like if they just remade it again, it would be really nice. And to get to the main point right here, which is the biggest point I have, and is the whole reason I made this video, is that Resident Evil 1 is the start of the franchise. And I don't say that in the sense that, yeah, it started the franchise, but my point is that it has Jill, Chris Redfield, and it has Albert Wesker. You don't know Albert Wesker in Resident Evil 5 if you haven't played the past 2 games. You might enjoy it still, I'm not saying that, but you don't really know it if you haven't played the other games, is what I'm trying to say. Resident Evil 1 starts your journey to know Chris, to know Jill, and to know Albert Wesker for sure, because they do follow along with the other games. And one of the mistakes I feel like they had in Resident Evil 3 Remake was changing the character of Jill, was changing her persona and into a different type of Jill that we don't really know anymore. And I think by remaking the original game, it will help players get a better understanding and a better background for Jill Valentine, or at least the new one that we're supposedly supposed to get used to. Not to mention, Resident Evil Death Island is a newest movie that's coming out. It takes place in the year 2015, but they're using the same model and the same type of Jill they used in Resident Evil 3 remakes. So it's very clear that Capcom wants this version of Jill to be the new Jill, the version that will eventually continue on the rest of the franchise. Yeah, it's obviously the same kind of Jill. I mean, obviously it's the same exact character, sure, but they are a bit different in personality. Either way, like I said, I'm happy with what we got. I'm happy we have Resident Evil 1 Remake to begin with. I really like the game as it is, and I don't necessarily think it needs a remake, but I think it's very possible, and I would really love it if they did that. I think it would be really cool to explore the mansion once again in a closer view of the character, right in front of me, with the zombies, the Crimson Heads, the Hunters, the Cerberus, hell, even the Spiders, which is just something that I would be looking forward to, and I'm sure a lot of others would as well. If you guys liked the video, please leave a like down below and subscribe, and leave a comment down below what you think. Do you not want Capcom to remake it? Please leave a comment down below what you think, and if you want to put some reasoning around it, you can as well. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.